So this pencast is on opposites and absolute values. So the opposite of a number or variable is just that same number with the opposite sign. So if it's positive, we make it negative, and if it's negative, we make it positive. So the directions say find the opposite of the following. So for example A, we want the opposite of 9, which is negative 9. In B, we want the opposite of negative 13, which is positive 13. In C, we want the opposite of 2.14, and that's negative 2.14. In D, we want the opposite of negative 5 over 7, and that will be positive 5 over 7. In example E, we want the opposite of x, and we don't know what x is, but we do know that its opposite is negative x. In F, we want the opposite of negative z, and once again, we don't know what z is, but we do know that its opposite is positive z. And finally, in example G, we want the opposite of 0, and 0 is neither positive nor negative, so its opposite is also 0. So now we want to move on to absolute value, and when we talk about an absolute value, we're really talking about its distance away from 0. So how many units from 0 is it? So when I see in example A the absolute value of 5, I know the answer is 5, because 5 is 5 units away from 0. We're not really concerned about the direction, whether it's to the right being positive or to the left being negative. We're only concerned about how far away from 0 it is. In example B, it says the absolute value of negative 7. Well, that is 7 units to the left of 0, so the answer is 7. In C, we want the absolute value of 3.7, and that's going to be 3.7. So notice in each of these examples, if I look directly outside of the absolute value, there's no sign. So when I see the absolute value of n, or the absolute value of negative n, if there's no sign on the outside of the absolute values, I know that these will be positive. In example D, it says the absolute value of negative 7 over 8. Since there's no sign on the outside of the absolute value, I know my answer is positive 7/8. Now in example E, notice that there is a negative sign on the absolute value. And so really what we're talking about here, although it's hidden, is when we see negative absolute value of 9, this really means negative 1 times the absolute value of 9. And we know that the absolute value of 9 is 9. So this is really negative 1 times 9, which is negative 9. So our answer is negative 9. The quick way, of course, to do this is to note that if there is a negative sign on the outside of the absolute values, our answer is always going to be negative. So in example F, where I see negative absolute value of negative 3/4, I note the negative sign on the outside of the absolute values and know that my answer is going to be negative 3/4. In example G, we do have a negative on the outside of the absolute value, but it's asking us to find the negative absolute value of 0. Well, we can't say negative 0 because there is no negative 0. So the answer here is 0, because 0 is neither positive nor negative.